and they were just four, not me personally, these were just four out of many, many companies caused by the Bill Bradleys of the world who created a ridiculous tax structure. Those four companies did very, very well. I used the system as to my advantage, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't like the idea of privatizing Social Security. I think it's certainly something that can be looked at. Who knows better about hard times than me? I had a company, it was doing well. Friends of mine went bankrupt, they went out of business, never to be heard from again.
Stephen Colbert just pulled off one of the most brutal takedowns Donald Trump has faced in years. And the reason it hit so hard is because he didn't even need to create a new argument. He simply played an old tape from 1999 and let Trump expose himself with his own words.
Today was supposed to be a special day that Donald Trump had to either fork over $464 million or Attorney General Letitia James was going to grab him by the property.
Back then, Trump sat down with Tim Russert on Meet the Press and openly defended his bankruptcies. He explained how he used the system to his advantage, walked away from bad deals, renegotiated debts, and kept promoting his properties aggressively, even when the numbers did not fully match reality. Trump presented all of it as smart business. In his view, successful businessmen knew how to bend the system without breaking it. At the time, many people saw it as classic Trump bravado, the image of a ruthless deal-maker who always found a way to land on his feet, no matter how messy things became. But 25 years later, those same business practices became the center of a massive fraud case in New York.
Appeals court paused restrictions on Trump running any New York company, as well as the restrictions on his adult son. Now Don Jr. and Eric can still open their hot dog and cocaine carts. The pundits are saying the court handed Trump a lifeline. That makes sense. By law, you have to throw someone a lifeline when they look that much like a waterlogged corpse.
Judge Arthur Engoron ruled that Trump had spent years inflating the value of his properties to secure loans and financial benefits. That included claiming Mar-a-Lago was worth hundreds of millions more than experts believed, and exaggerating the size of his Trump Tower penthouse to nearly 3 times its actual square footage. And that is what made Colbert's segment so brutal. The old interview did not feel disconnected from the fraud ruling. It felt like a preview. Trump's own words from 1999 lined up almost perfectly with the behavior the court later said he had been using for years.
Fraud ruling.
Are you joining the Reform Party?
I really believe the Republicans are just too crazy right. I'm seeing the Democrats as far too, Bradley and Gore are so liberal, it's just too liberal for me.
Trump described the mindset behind those actions decades before the court case ever happened. He openly treated bankruptcy as a strategic weapon and suggested that pushing the value of assets beyond reality was simply part of negotiation. But in 2024, the court saw those same actions very differently. What Trump once framed as business instinct was now being described as material misrepresentation and fraud. That is why Colbert's segment hit so hard. He placed the two timelines side by side, and suddenly the audience was not just watching an old interview. They were hearing what sounded like a 25-year-old explanation of the same behavior a judge would later rule illegal. That is what made the clip explode online. It was not built on opinion, speculation, or partisan spin. It was Trump's own words colliding with a modern courtroom verdict. And the irony was impossible to miss. For decades, Trump sold himself as a genius businessman who understood the system better than anyone else. He convinced millions that walking away from failed deals, restructuring debt, and inflating confidence around his brand were signs of brilliance. But Colbert's point was simple and brutal. Describing questionable behavior with confidence does not make it legal. Trump spent years proudly telling the world how he operated, assuming people would admire the strategy. But now, those same explanations are being replayed under the shadow of a fraud ruling. The most damaging part is that Trump never really denied the behavior. He defended it. He normalized it. He turned it into part of his brand. And that is why the 1999 tape feels so powerful today. It no longer sounds like just another old television interview. It sounds like a warning that everyone ignored until the courts finally stepped in. Colbert understood that perfectly. He did not need dramatic edits or exaggerated commentary because the contrast already told the story. In 1999, Trump was selling himself as a business genius on television. In 2024, a judge was reviewing financial records, loan documents, and years of evidence inside a courtroom. Same behavior. completely different consequences. And now critics are saying Trump's biggest mistake was believing that openly describing how he played the game would somehow protect him from accountability later. Because once Colbert replayed that tape, people stopped hearing a businessman explaining strategy. They started hearing a man unknowingly documenting the very practices that would later define one of the most damaging legal judgments of his career.